Okay, so I'm just going to walk you guys through the notes for today. You can read through them yourself, so you can skip forward if you want. There's a few things I'm going to add to some of this, though, so I would at least skim through the video to kind of get the information. So first thing is trophic categories. Like it has here, the word trophic means feeding. Okay. So essentially, these are the ways that things get their energy through food, obviously. So the first category is producers. It's the first level on the biomass pyramid. I'll talk about that in a second. They use photosynthesis to convert solar energy to chemical energy. This level organism are referred to as autotrophs. Okay, autotrophs, auto means self, and troph obviously means feeding. So examples, you can see there, grasses, flowers, trees, blah, blah, blah. Then the second category is primary consumers. So there's consumers, and there's two categories of consumers. There's primary and secondary. So primary is the second level in the biomass pyramid. Primary consumers only eat from the producer category. These are called herbivores. This level organism are referred to as heterotrophs. So herbivores, plant eaters. Heterotroph means like other feeding. So they get their food and energy from other organisms, other living organisms. Okay. Secondary consumers, third level on the biomass pyramid, they eat from both producer and primary categories, so from both of these two. So we've got some different breakdowns within this. There are carnivores, which, meat eaters. They eat only other consumers, both primary and secondary. So this examples would be lions, wolves, sharks, and snakes, among other things. And then there's omnivores, which eat both producers and consumers. Omni means every or all. So eating all from all categories. So examples would be birds, humans, bears, geckos, salamanders, frogs, praying mantis, stuff like that eat both. This level organism are referred to as heterotrophs as well. So they're like primary consumers in that. So you've got some sort of different breakdowns here. We've got the categories of herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, which is a breakdown within the consumers. And then we've got larger categories of autotrophs and heterotrophs. Okay. The fourth trophic category is detritus feeders and decomposers. These are the third level on the biomass pyramid. They're with the secondary consumers, but they feed on dead plant and animal matter. So there are two categories within detritus feeders and decomposers. There are primary detritus feeders and decomposers. There are secondary detritus feeders and decomposers, similar to the consumers. Primary feed directly on detritus. These are referred to as decomposers. Maggots, earthworms, termites, ants, fungi. Secondary are things that feed primarily on the primary decomposers, so mites, millipedes, beetles, stuff like that. Now, one of the very important functions of detritus feeders and decomposers is they allow the nutrient cycle to continue by returning valuable minerals and nutrients to the soil. I think Nick mentioned this in class, like if you don't have this level, the detritus feeders and decomposers, nothing would actually break down. There was an interesting case of this occurring after the nuclear explosion in Chernobyl in Russia back in the 80s. The radiation fallout from that killed like everything, and it was in the soil and stuff like that. So including all the detritus feeders and decomposers and stuff. So there were things that were dead, like trees and plant matter and stuff, that didn't decompose for a really long time because all of the detritus feeders and decomposers had been killed from the radiation fallout. and things didn't start decomposing until those things started coming back into the area. So they are very important to continue that. All right. Now, we've got some definitions down here. The difference between a food chain and a food web. A food chain is probably what you're most familiar with in terms of like talking about these things. And that's the transfer of energy and material through a series of organisms as each one is fed upon by the next. Okay, so that's like one thing going into the next. So if I were to show you, hold on here. Okay, if I were to show you this whole entire picture would be a food web. The chain would be one part of it. So a chain would be like cattail to rabbit to fox. That would be a chain. Okay, the food web is the interconnectedness of all the food chains within an ecosystem. So this whole entire thing, it would be the food web, all of these relationships together. Okay? All right. And then the term biomass, again, breaking it down, bio referring to life. So this is literally the mass of life, or the total combined net weight or mass of all the organisms at each trophic level. Right. This leads into the second thing we're going to talk about today, which is the biomass pyramid. The biomass pyramid shows the relationships between the total mass of organisms from each trophic or feeding level. Okay. What we have here is the bottom of the biomass producers, or the bottom of the pyramid, is the biomass producers. And they've got 100 times biomass compared to the other ones. Primary consumer herbivores are 10 times mass, and secondary consumers, carnivores, omnivores, decomposers, are 1 times. Now, what does this mean? Well, if you have an animal, I'm going to draw this out. So say we have, all right, so let's take a human. Say we have a 150-pound human. Now this is going to be very, this is very simplistic, okay? Obviously it doesn't go all this way, but just the concept. So it takes 10 times the mass of a secondary consumer. It takes 10 times the amount of primary consumer to support that. So this is the amount of biomass it takes to support each level. So it's 10 times each time you move a level. So say we as humans ate, trying to think of something. So let's make it kind of goofy here just to get the idea. Say we ate alligator. Okay? So that means that if all we ate was alligator, in order to produce a 150-pound person, we would need 1,500 pounds of alligator to support a 150-pound person. Okay? Let's say the alligator ate chicken. So that means to get 1,500 pounds of alligator, there would need to be 15,000 pounds of chicken to support 1,500 pounds of alligator. Now let's say the chicken eats insects. To support 15,000 pounds of insects, we would need, to support 15,000 pounds of chicken, we would need 150 100,000 pounds of insects. Okay, and say the insects ate plants. You can see where this is going. You would need 1,500,000 pounds of plants. So, in order to support a 150-pound person, if this is the way it was, if this is the way that it went, actually I guess the arrows can be reversed, we would need all of this to support a 150-pound person. Okay. So every time you move on the scale, on the biomass pyramid, you only retain 10% of the previous level's mass. So going from level to level, you get 10% mass transfer and 90% mass loss. That's where the 10 times comes in. Sorry, move that over a little bit. There we go. 10% mass transfer, 90% mass loss. Every time you go up, you go up a step, or basically every time you have a feeding relationship. Okay. Now, why is this? Why do we lose 90% of the mass? It doesn't get transferred. Okay. There are a few different reasons. So, reasons for mass loss. One, some mass is broken down and used for energy and other body functions. Okay, now, mass doesn't turn into energy. Okay, it just stores it and releases it in terms of this kind of stuff. But in some of these processes, mass is broken down, matter is broken down and converted into different forms. And some of it, in using it, is expelled by the body in things such as sweat, water loss, stuff like that. Okay. Along with that, we get some mass is expelled by our body as waste. Okay, so this, urination, feces, stuff like that. It doesn't all turn into body mass. Okay. And the third one is incomplete consumption. In other words, the organism eating the thing doesn't eat actually all of it. Okay, so you bring a chicken home to eat for your family, you don't eat the entire thing, including the bones and the organs and stuff like that. So some of the mass isn't actually consumed, and therefore obviously not transferred. Okay, so these are some of the main reasons for mass loss as you go up levels. All right. Now, the last thing with this is this idea of 10% mass loss and 90% mass loss and 10% transfer. What does that mean? Well, that means the higher up on the biomass pyramid an organism eats, the more resources it takes to support it. Okay, so if we followed this, and if humans only ate alligators, that only ate chickens, that only ate insects, and only ate plants, it would take all of this biomass just to support a 150-pound person. That's a lot of resources. Okay, and food and water. Now, the lower down you eat on the biomass pyramid, the fewer resources it takes. So, say you have somebody who's a vegetarian. So a 150-pound person, okay, eating only essentially fruits and vegetables, whatever, stuff like that. It would just take 1,500 pounds. Okay, so the lower down that an organism eats, the fewer resources it takes to sustain it. Okay, now I'm not suggesting everybody run out and become vegetarian or vegan. If you want to do that, great, but I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying we should be aware that the more steps in this chain of mass and energy transfer, the more overall resources it takes. So having a balance is good, not only for your health, but also for the environment and the amount of resources it takes to sustain that. Okay? And that's it for those first two sections.